Welcome back. I recently moved, which means for the first time I got my very own backyard. And one day it's going to be a green oasis, but I kind of worry that I missed out on some key summer months to do some gardening.
Hey, Jess, you don't need to worry because our next guest says that you can grow in late summer and even into the fall. And better yet, you can do it in containers. Please welcome horticulturalist and edible garden expert Christina Chung from Vancouver. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
We're so excited to be talking with you today, Christina. And as you can see, most of my backyard is concrete. So until I jackhammer the you know what out of that, containers are actually ideal for me. But let's start by getting the dirt on dirt. What's the difference between like the dirt that I can find in the ground and then potting soil?
So for me, I like to think of soil as something that's alive, full of life, and also full of mystery. There could be fungal spores, could be insect eggs, and really just a mix of things that we just can't tell what it is. Like, what the heck is in here? So that is soil from my garden. With that, I don't really want to put that in a containerized situation because without knowing the components, it makes it really difficult to manage the plant and keep it healthy. For container growers, I always recommend going to the garden center and getting what's called potting mix. So it's a bagged mixture. It's clean. It's usually a base of peat or coconut fibers, and it's full of all these little white specks called perlite. And what that does is add a lot of porosity or airspace to the mix, and that keeps the roots healthy, and it helps water flow right through your container to keep everything nice and happy.
So, Christina, I am a gardening novice. I really don't know anything about it. In our backyard, we have these raised beds, and that's where my husband Yassik keeps the tomato plants. So I just want to know, would you consider a raised bed a container since it's off the ground, it's kind of separate, away from things? And if so, do you use potting soil there or outside soil?
Yeah, so with anything that is raised off of the ground, I would consider it just a large version of this. So again,
Hmm.
back to the idea of like not wanting to introduce like a mystery mix into a closed situation, I would still reach for the potting mix and just treat it as a very large version of this. Especially if you're doing tomatoes and other crops, you don't want like a soupy situation, and having a nice fluffy mix keeps everything just well draining and super healthy.
Well, I'm super excited that I can still squeeze in some vegetable gardening this year. But what would you recommend I do specifically sort of in midsummer and that's maybe like fail proof?
Yeah, so for like all of Canada, we're actually quite fortunate. Many of us have windows of time where we can sow really easy plants like greens. So I love recommending kale, mustard greens, salad mixes. So those are really great novice-friendly plants. And you can also do rounds of radishes and carrots. So those are really fun. And with kale and leafy greens, because gardening is so popular right now, in a lot of garden centers, you're going to find a lot of plants, sometimes called starts. They're essentially just seedlings. And with those plants, you can just plop them into your container or the ground and you're good to go. But for people who want to, experiment with different flavors or textures or different looks, you can go for seeds. So it's great starting a lot of plants from seed. And yeah, it's great to see plants grow from a seed and then 1 month later turn into a plant that looks kind of like this.
This is so exciting. I have some kale seeds and a container here. And I think the container is about 5 gallons roughly. How many kale plants could I fit?
Yeah, so if you're looking to grow a larger plant, let's say with those big luscious leaves, for a container your size, Jess, and similar to mine, I would put no more than 2 plants that are going to be
Okay.
about this size. If you're looking for tender greens with maybe leaves about 6 inches tall, you can probably get away with 4 to 5 with a size this large.
So let's say you're in the fall, and some days in the fall are really hot, and then some days are really chilly. So, what is the lowest temperature that you can go to make sure that your plants are healthy?
What's great about kale and other leafy greens is that they are cold hardy down to some low temperatures. So cold hardy meaning like a frost or some lower temperatures isn't going to kill it off. Many types of kale can actually withstand low temperatures of, get this, minus 20 Celsius. So that means all throughout Canada, many of us can grow throughout the fall and throughout the winter and still have plants that will spring back to life. And what's really neat about kale is that when the temperatures drop, they start to produce their own natural antifreeze. So we as gardeners, when the things start thawing and we go to harvest and we eat the leaves, it actually tastes sweet because it has that natural antifreeze localized in the leaves. So it's fabulous. You get something that's alive and delicious.
That is so
Wow.
cool. Okay, let's get my kale on. I've got a pen here for making a little hole, and I got my seeds. Tell me about spacing and how many seeds I should be putting in each little hole.
So before we get into the actual distance, I want to point out when you're making holes, let's not go too deep. For kale seeds,
Okay.
it's recommended around 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. A little bit more shallow is better because you don't
Okay.
want the freshly germinated seed to work so hard to reach the surface of the
Right.
soil. So a little shallower is better. And then to
Okay.
address the distance between the holes you're making, I'd say to start, let's do 4 to 6 inches between each hole. And as for number of seeds, some people like to just put one per hole. I like the little added insurance of knowing that something's going to grow in place by putting
Yeah.
2 to 3 seeds per hole. Yeah, just to make sure.
So, Christina, let's talk about upcycling. What do you, in terms of upcycling materials for new containers, and do we need to amend?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and also like a really fun topic because we can upcycle all sorts of materials. So this is just a regular old salad container, and you can use salad containers, pails. You're probably going to find all sorts of neat household items. Just make sure that it's food safe. It didn't have any chemicals in it. But there are 3 things that I look for in a container. So I'm happy with this because it's about 6 inches deep. So that means I can have enough potting mix in there to allow for good root growth for the plants. So I would likely do leafy greens in here. Another thing, you want to make sure that the container is sturdy enough because if you start adding potting mix and you add water, this whole thing is going to get quite heavy and you don't want all of your work and your precious plants to just crumble just because the container can't hold it. And then the last and probably most important thing is making sure that you have drainage holes on the bottom. So regardless of what material, what kind of container you're using, make sure to drill holes. You can either use a drill, or if you don't have a drill, you can just take a skewer or like a screw or a nail and just punch holes at the bottom. And that will allow for all the extra moisture to drain out the bottom so that it's nice and healthy and not soupy inside.
What is the watering philosophy between container and outside?
So with a plant, let's say this kale, if I plant it in the ground, it will likely have a more extensive and stronger root system. It's going to be able to send out roots, further out beyond its immediate area and look for water and nutrients. But if we have this plant in a container, the only water it's going to get is from rain or what we give it. And that being said, we want to make sure that we water in a really healthy way. And for a containerized situation, what I recommend is to water deeply and thoroughly. So that actually helps train the plant to send out roots deeper, and it also helps the plant anchor itself, which is really great. Water deeply and thoroughly, as opposed to visiting every day and adding a light sprinkle of water, because that actually trains the plant to have a very shallow root system, and over time, that's not the healthiest plant.
Okay, I've taken the plant out of the pot. I've got some water here. So tell me what to do.
Yeah, so you're holding your plant, that's great. And let's just go like this and get a feel for the weight of the plant before we add moisture to it. Just get a sense. You don't need to know the exact weight, but you get a sense of what it feels like. And when I say water thoroughly, what we want to do is saturate the inside potting mix. And one visual cue that tells me that it's saturated is when water is dripping out the bottom of the holes. And that's why having drainage holes is so important. So it's like a visual cue for me.
Oh, I see some drips.
So if you just feel the plant with both of your hands just lifted up, you'll probably notice a difference in the weight.
Yes.
Like it's going to be a bit heavier. And over time, like once you practice this, like lifting before and after watering, you'll get a sense of what it feels like, you know, when the plant needs water. And then you can just gauge from that, because sometimes the visual like cues that the plant gives us, like maybe the leaves are a little bit wilty, that could be overwatering or underwatering. So just relying on what you see with your eyes can be a little bit tricky. So I like to go with the weight method.
Well, Christina, while Lainey works on her incredible watering techniques, I gotta thank you from behalf of both of us. This has been incredible. And tune into our social media channels after the show to find out all of these great tips. But don't go anywhere because we'll be right back.